Hi, my name is Salamishah Tillet, and I am a professor of creative writing and Africana studies at Rutgers University in Newark. But I'm also a critic, and I write for the New York Times about theater and film and television. And I'm really excited to be here today to have this really fun, exciting, and informative conversation about Black theater, about drama, and also the role of Black women artists as we think about all of the ways in which African American theater has shaped our conversations about race and justice today. So I'm honored to be with you all. We have a multi-generational panel here. Everyone hails from the one and only Howard University. And so I think it'll just be a really rich conversation. We're also in this really important time to think about Black performance and also Black acting with the controversy around the Oscars that I recently wrote about. So we'll get into all of these things, but most importantly, we're here to celebrate Black girlhood, Black Girl Freedom Week, an organization that I'm really proud to have co-founded and to continue to be part of with my work through the organization A Long Walk Home. Okay, so let's just jump in. We have some really exciting people, some really talented people here today. So first I would like to start with Professor Nikkole Salter. If you could just introduce yourself, where you hail from. I know you are at Howard now and you're a Howard alum, but just give us just a little bit about like your origin, and
Sure.
then we'll continue the conversation.
Sure. My name is Nikkole Salter. I'm an actress, a dramatist, and an educator and an advocate. I want to give you a shout out because you're in my old stomping grounds. I actually have my home in East Orange, so you're right around the corner at Rutgers. I'm sure they're happy, 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 happy to have you. I'm hail from Los Angeles, California, West Side. Are people still saying that? I feel like that's an old thing, but I have to do it. It's sort of like HU, it's just sort of how it goes. um, I went to Howard University also for my undergraduate education, and I went to NYU's graduate acting program where I got my MFA. I'm currently serve as the chair of the Theater Arts Department in the Chadwick A. Boseman College of Fine Arts at Howard University. And these two amazing young women, Mariah Bell Williams and Amaya McGinty, are two students who are attending the programs in the Department of Theater Arts. Should I segue to them?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Mariah.
Hey everyone, my name is Mariah Bo Williams. I'm a current junior BFA musical theater major and a theater administration minor at the real HU, if I do say so myself. Um, I hail from Chicago, Illinois. That's the place I call home, but my family currently lives in California, so I've gotten to experience a lot of different sides of the theater industry, different geographical locations, and I'm excited to continue broadening my scope and my understanding at Howard.
That means it's my turn. Hello, everyone. My name is Amaya McGinty, and I am currently a senior acting major and psychology minor at the illustrious Howard University. I am a director, an actor, a poet, and arts administrator who's been working within the DC theater community now my entire time I've been at Howard. And I hail from Augusta, Georgia. So I'm a long ways from home up here, but I love the city much better. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with you all and being in space and sharing space with amazing Black women.
So, thank you. This is so exciting. I did attend the other HU, but I still think of you all as the real HUs, just so you know. And I guess I'll start with girlhood. I have a child who lives with me. He's named after Sidney Poitier and Sidney Bechet, and he's really like 7 years old and deep into like his craft of like acting and filmmaking. And so I'm curious about, and so I don't know who he's going to become, but there's some insight that we can gather from who he is right now. So I wanted to talk to you all about your childhood and your girlhood. And was theater something that was, were you always performing? Were you reading plays? Were your parents taking you to plays? When did the idea or the moment, this epiphany happen? I know, Mariah, you grew up in California, so maybe that was both of you, Professor Salters and Mariah grew up in, I don't know if film was always there, but I'm curious, how did theater come to you as children? Or is that something you developed later on as teens or young adults?
Well, I would say I was definitely a child bitten by the bug. I was raised in Los Angeles, but Los Angeles shouldn't be mistaken for Hollywood. Those are two different things. But it is the town business, just like if you live in DC, you likely work in some way for the federal government. I got bitten because my mother wanted me to be an athlete. She thought that that would be my ticket to an education. So I tried all the balls and all the all the things. None of them really stuck. And I lived in a household where I wasn't allowed to do nothing. So I saw a program, I'm going to tell my age now, that was founded and hosted by a woman named Danielle Spencer. Danielle Spencer played Dee on a show called What's Happening. And so I was enthralled by that show and by her, and they were doing a production, an urbanized production of the story of Cinderella. And I was about 9, I was cast as Cinderella, and I got bit. But that's not why I stayed in the business. We can talk about that later, but that's how it started.
Similarly, I was also in a house that couldn't do anything, could not do nothing. But I was always performing at a young age, even though I couldn't sing to save my life. I was writing songs. I was always putting on a show for family, the start, the PTA meetings. That was always me. But believe it or not, I was actually a STEM kid up until like junior or senior year of high school, even though I went to a performing arts high school and middle school. But that's where my passion really developed, is when I went to my performing arts schools. And I fell in love with so many different things. And I was like, oh my goodness, I have to do this for the rest of my life. Still learning what it was at that time, but yeah, it was clear that I was going to be an art student to everyone, and I was going to be an artist to everyone. When I was always, the attention had to be on me, I was always on stage, always performing.
For myself, I've been singing my whole life. I grew up in the church. But I actually, and this is a more recent development, I started to claim the term storyteller over actress or performer because my love for theater started from reading and getting to embody other people's stories and learn different things about myself, about humanity, the human condition from fiction. So now as I like live in this space now, my parents put me in theater because I was always like, I used to read a page of a book and then get up and then act it out in my room. But then I was singing in church choir, so musical theater just became the meeting point for it. And then my mom was a dancer, so dance just lived in my house. And now I'm here and I love it.
I love this. Thank you for sharing these like moments of awakening that you had as children. And Mariah, because I'm a parent, but also because I write a lot about artists who may have these amazing careers or may not have gotten the recognition that they properly should have received. But one thing I'm always kind of interested in is like, who nurtures that, right? And oftentimes, like in our culture, we have this notion, like the Western notion of the genius that kind of like just appears and like then excels or is downtrodden or something, but it's always a very individualistic story. And I find that oftentimes in the world that I'm in, that a lot of the Black artists that have found this thing that they can't, let go of, have a community or have institutions or have family members that really have nurtured and exposed them to this at an early age. And so again, this notion of like Black girlhood, like Black Girl Freedom Fund is created to support Black girls and to have them have all the opportunities available so they can be free. I'm curious for you all, who were the people or the institutions that you attended as young people that really like saw this thing in you and said like keep on going despite like the fact that you may not mean you're going to become a doctor or a finance person. That means that you're going to be an artist, and that means you're going to see the world differently, and it means sometimes that you maybe struggling financially, or may mean, you know, you have a check from the first day, who knows, but that to be an artist requires a lot of investment from other people at a young age. And so I'm just curious for you all, who are the people who saw your potential as Black girls and said, I'm going to pour all this into you and let you fly? Who would you say, who or what were those entities?
I have to give this one to my parents,
Mhm.
100%. Even today, because I recently declared my theater administration minor, and my dad was like, "I'm happy you're chasing the things that you love, but don't forget the dream. You want to perform, you want to tell people stories, and don't let your love and success within the administration world stop you from chasing that dream."
Mm.
Both of my parents are artists. My dad did theater growing up and worked within Chicago in the storefront theaters in high school, and my mom went to Whitney Young and danced her whole life. So, truth, I spent a lot of time in a lot of um, Eurocentrified institutions prior to attending Howard, and while they supported me, there was a large part of me that they did not know how to support. So it wasn't until I got here that that part of me was able to be nurtured by other people who knew what it needed. Um, but through every step of the way, my parents were pushing me, saying, "Mariah, you can do this. Mariah, you can do this. Mariah, you can do this." Even in the moments where I said I was going to be a doctor, they said, "Are you sure? Because I don't think you could. I don't think you'd be happy waking up each day and not being able to tell somebody else's story."
Mm.
If I may, like, it's so interesting that you say that because my story is like the opposite a little bit. Because, like I said, I was a STEM kid for a long time, and I was always like praised and affirmed for my like academics brilliance. That the fact that I was performing was always a hobby for me and was always seen as a hobby. So, yes, people like encouraged and like, oh, this is something cool that you do. But no one ever took it seriously until honestly, when I was transitioning from high school into undergrad. And honestly, my battle to even be a theater major was a long one. And now, of course, my parents, I have their full support. They're my biggest fans. Um, and like my number one cheerleaders. But for a long time, it was self-motivation. I was also in a very white performing arts school for 7 years. And so often I wasn't being affirmed in those spaces either. So it was like self-motivated. Honestly, my biggest community for the longest time was my poetry and spoken word community, who saw something in me, saw my love of storytelling, saw
Mm.
how I was writing, and just saw my passion when I was on stage and sharing my art and making those connections, that were like, no, keep doing this, keep doing this, keep doing this, which then led to theater, which then led to acting and directing and so forth. But yeah, it was them. And then eventually my parents, who, like I said, now to this day, support my dreams 100%, 1,000%.
Wow. I wonder what it was for you, um, Salamisha, but for me, it was, I've never not been supported.
Hmm.
So I'm blessed, and I recognize that, by not only my immediate family, but by my entire community, even beyond me. I'm definitely an acting kid. I grew up acting. I was a child actor. But if it weren't for institutions that were conceived and executed by Black women in my community, I wouldn't have had anywhere to go, perhaps. Or perhaps I wouldn't have been able to afford to go, which is always a thing. So from Marla Gibbs, when I grew up, she had an academy called Crossroads Arts Academy, and she owned a theater called the Vision Theater in what is now lovingly known as Leimert Park, or it had always been known as Leimert Park, but I guess the new generation of people only know it from Issa Rae shows, like it just sprung up from nowhere. It's always been there. And since I would say my grandmother's generation, it's always been Black. That was an amazing institution. We had theater happening 8 nights a week in our community with people who are large stars and people who were strivers and people who were community members. Churches sang in those shows, and professional Broadway singers sang in those shows. Like it was very much Black joy personified. Wendy Raquel Robinson, who also was a Howard grad, started a conservatory called Amazing Grace Conservatory after she had left Faith Acting Studios, which was run by Deirdre Weston and Felicia Scott. I went to all of these institutions from the moment that I was 9 till I graduated for high school. Um, and so when you talk about community and why I stayed, I started because I got to wear the glitter shoes and the makeup and the dress. That's how it began. I think I stayed throughout my adolescence and pre-adulthood for the community. And I continued for the power of the narrative. Yeah. Why did you start, Salamisha?
Yeah, no, this is thank you. I think it's turning it on me. Well, I think my mom's an artist. She's a musician. And I live in Newark now, and she went to Newark. Has the first performing arts school in the country here, high school called Arts High.
Hi.
So that was kind of always there. I was born in Boston, and we lived around the corner from a community art center called the Elma Lewis School of Performing Arts, in the tradition of Black women organization. She's the first Black woman, I think, to win the Guggenheim, and she created this community art center. I lived in Dorchester, Massachusetts, so working class Black neighborhood. And I was, they did Black Nativity, Langston Hughes's every year. And so we would participate in that. So I was exposed to multiple disciplines at once, I think. And if you live in Boston, the other thing I used to do is go to free art classes at the Museum of Fine Arts. So that was kind of like my earliest, living in a household full of music and then being in these performing arts spaces and then visual art spaces just as a child. And so I think if you look at my writing, I move across genres very easily because for me the center is Blackness, right? And then there are these various disciplines that are trying to understand the question of freedom and Blackness and freedom and art. And I move in and out. And then I went to a high school here in New Jersey, independent school, where I had a really, really amazing English teachers. And so they really helped me understand criticism, which is like a kind of unique, like, it's creative writing, but it's not creative writing. So I think that was very formative for me, just loving literature, but also becoming obsessed with like what's happening in this story that's not just emotionally exciting for me, but also like there's a lot of things that the writer's doing that are complicated, that we're supposed to follow the story. We're supposed to understand these characters. And so I kind of fell in love with that idea of understanding, not necessarily the intention, but like what the writer does to create this world for the reader. So it makes me think of your point, Nikkole, I'm going to call you Nikkole, about narrative and the power of narrative and what you meant by that.
Yeah, I wish I try to instill this in my students now as much as possible because I wish someone had told me that stories are spells. Like stories are the software to the body's hardware. You actually can't live your life without a narrative. And what we do as those people working in the narrative industries is provide narrative options for the programming of humanity. And once I realized that that's what we were doing, it took me a while. I was floored by the responsibility that comes from not only revealing your narrative of life, but also for embodying someone else's, fiction or non. It also made me think about who is constructing the narratives that are programming me and how I can help awaken people to their power to choose the narratives that they let inside their heads and hearts. It just, one of the wonderful things about an education in storytelling, broadly speaking, is that there's not a spot where it is not. It is always needed. It is always welcomed. It is always powerful and transformative when you know what you're doing. And so our students move across the creative arts economy for sure, but even outside of it as they continue to develop and evolve in their lives, but none of them regret the education that they received in the narrative.
Wow. You said something just now, which I think is unique to probably dance and theater. This idea that the body itself is the conduit for the story, right? And I just wanted to talk to you, Mariah and Amaya, about this, like in this age where we're really grappling with trying to tell new stories about Black bodies moving around freely against this real trauma that we're seeing constantly in the news, which Black bodies are so vulnerable and under siege. Like, how do you all feel the power of the stage and the power of the Black performer telling these stories? Like, how does that like electrify you, or how do you see that power that you all are inhabiting and often and also creating for other people as administrators, so as performers but also as administrators? Like, what to use the power of the stage in this moment?
What's interesting actually is that I'm a writer, and to this day I cannot describe with words how it feels to be in spaces like that, because it's unparalleled, it's unmatched. And it's also the reason why I stayed in art, is the power of the narrative, is that I could be on stage, or not even be on stage, I can direct something, I could write something and share it just because I dared to be vulnerable, share it with someone. And another Black woman would come up to me after the show and say, I felt that. I felt that before, or I've seen myself. Or I've had little Black girls come up to me in tears after things that I've done and say, that's how I feel. Like, you've captured it. And it's like, that's why I do it. It's because someone needs to make sure that these voices are heard. And that's why what we do is so amazing. It's so powerful. Like I said, is that we dare to be vulnerable. We dare to open ourselves up to the world so that others can live vicariously through us, so that we can heal, that we can experience catharsis, that we can build community, that we can share and talk and connect in this very human, very visceral way. And like I said, it's unmatched feeling to know that you have the power just from telling a story, which of course is so complicated, but it's also so inherent to who we are as Black people, that we have the power to just have that effect on other human beings. Because even if it's not on a stage, just because we were open.
I definitely agree. It's empowering in ways that words can barely describe. As a musical theater performer, it's also terrifying because, especially in this age where there's so much change happening and so much more truth and so much more vulnerability, opening yourself, for lack of a better term, and I think there is one, but to some degree, opening yourself up to be a spectacle of the rawness of what a Black woman or Black femme identifying person actually feels and actually embodies can be very, very scary. But what I've been using recently is, especially movement, kind of like what you were speaking about for dance, is for me, every time I move my body, I am inherently participating in like the ancestral rituals that Africans continuously continue to do. And it's the way that I connect to my ancestors and make sure that their stories are being told through me, but also allow myself to be open because it reminds me of the people that came before me that fought for me to be able to be vulnerable in this way because they weren't able to be.
I think that's really important what you just said, that with each generation of storytellers, it seems the demand for truth escalates. The demand for it to be represented, not just spoken. What is real, what is true, what is honest, people wanting to connect with that. But I also think that people think that we live in a culture where story is relegated to entertainment in the zeitgeist. And so people don't really consider its origins or what it's for. No one started telling a story because they were interested in you seeing their jazz hands. Everybody, these are technologies designed for our calibration and healing and growth. They're designed to help us participate in our collective conscious evolution. And so when you engage a story, whether you're telling it, whether you're directing it, whether you're moving through it, whether you're watching it, you're taking a sacred secular space to either reflect on what it means to be who you are and what it means, what life means to you, to us, or you're practicing life, you're practicing the possibilities, you're considering, you're experimenting. It's either one or the other. And so when you talk about the Black body in storytelling currently, I think that we have inherited a system that has allowed us to reflect a lot as Black people, as Black femme identifying people, but not a system that has allowed us to project quite as much, to practice, to experiment with how we want to take the reins of our evolution to the degree to which a person can. Who do we want to be now? What if this? What if that? I wonder if, like, what are those, how are the narratives of our lives allowing us to ask those kinds of questions? And how are the people who serve you through narrative, like the two young women that you see here and us two, how do we help people just sort of muscle and elbow out some space for Black women to do that? That's what I've been thinking about lately, for sure.
But how do you do that in practice? What are one of the ways in which, and I can answer it after everyone does too, but
I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear how you practice that, Salamisha.
I mean, basically, I think I practice it by taking the work seriously, like taking Black artists seriously, Black women artists seriously. And that sounds like obvious if you're a person who appreciates the traditions and comes from them yourself, but it actually isn't that, it takes a lot of training. I would say I've had a lot of training. And also an attentiveness to the breadth and the depth and the multiple languages that a Black performer or a Black photographer may be deploying as they're creating this art, so I don't know, like I noticed that when I think people appreciate me as a critic because I'm serious about their work, and I don't take, you could be as famous as one is, or as again an emerging artist that is just figuring out their way, and I think I treat I treat them similarly. Like, to me, it's about understanding that it takes a lot of time and effort to create something, and it takes a lot of vulnerability and risk to share this thing that's deep inside of you with the world, that's very personal and then suddenly becomes public. And then if you're a Black artist or a Black woman artist or Black girl or artist or Black queer artist or all of those things at once, then there's other levels of vulnerability that you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And then as an artist, right? So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's like, that's how I try to create space and make space for Black women in the world through my particular, and I think hopefully people can see that in the body of work that I've produced too. So
why? So you're talking to a person who's been critiqued a lot in her life.
Yeah, but the critic isn't like
a lot of critiques.
Yeah, well, it depends how you just define a critic. I feel like the critic is
I think, go on. I currently have a play on at Luna Stage, which is around the corner.
Yes. Yeah, around the corner from me. Yes, I saw that. Yes.
And quite frankly, we just got the most dismissive review I think I've ever gotten in my entire life.
Oh, okay. But I don't do reviews. I do.
Right, but it's still like a form of criticism is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, that's fine. That's true. But
it's just like, where does the critic sit in the ecology of the development of the art and the artist?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, I was trained in academia, so I studied, like, that's what, all the theoretical things. If a playwright writes something and people are in school studying and trying to understand it, that's how I was trained. And then I feel like the critic, I think the critic is the person who both is taking the work seriously. This is how I approach it, and also provides a lens for an audience that they may not have had before that moment, that for me anyway, that I illuminate things that are in this story or provide a historical context for what the artist is doing. I kind of want you to feel like, you're next to me at a gallery, or you're next to me in a seat and we're watching it together. And this is what I saw, and you can take it what you want or not, but this is how I experienced this thing. And I think I provide some insight that someone else wouldn't have. And so that's how I see my work. And I see the work of people like Margot Jefferson, Farrah Griffin, like I'm a teacher. So I teach I teach students how to deal with these things, to understand them. And then I hope I'm also taking those skills and sharing them with the world. So that's me. I don't do reviews. I think probably because that's not necessarily my strength, is the analysis and the storytelling and the sharing of that point of view with others. So
it's that enlightenment, that insight that you can bring.
Yeah, that's what I think. I that's what I like to do. So that's like, but I did do, like, in college. I had this column called, I wrote for the Black newspaper at Penn, and the feminist newspaper. But for the Black newspaper, I had Mo Better reviews. I mean, it's like you talk about you date yourself. I so I did review in college. Yeah.
Mo Better reviews.
So bad, so bad.
I talked to one critic on a panel. I was on a panel full of theater critics, representing the artist's voice. That was in India, doesn't matter. But one of the things that one of the critics said to me really stuck with me all the time. And I think about that even broadening beyond just the theater criticism in the commercial sense, which is that they help to chronicle that something happened. And she said there are many productions being done by people of color in my area that no one would ever know ever happened if I didn't write about it.
That makes sense.
Wow.
Especially with theater exhibitions, things that are things that are like actually require an in-person, a live experience, I think, which is part of the power that we talked about earlier. But also, it's true. Where do you live in history, right? And it's so different to read a play than to see a play, right? And I teach plays all the time, and then I've been teaching Top Dog for years, and then I just saw the production, and I'm like, whoa, there's a gap between what my students are experiencing. You know what I mean? Like, particularly with this genre, it's like, so that's an interesting way of chronicling what has been put before you, and keeping that alive for people to in the future. That's a pretty way of thinking about it, I think.
Yeah.
But the reviews, I mean, I'm a writer, so the book, I get my stuff reviewed too, and
I know you do.
And it's like, oh wow, you got the creator, and this is we can talk about the creator and the reviewed piece are two different things. You have to create. And my question for you all was like, I'll just say this. I used to like read all these interviews with people, and like the artist is like, I can't think about the review. I don't read the review. But honestly, I do believe this idea of like, you can't think about that person while you're creating, and you can't even think about, you can't anticipate the criticism to create. And so I was wondering for you, who are your audiences? I loved, Amaya, when you talk about these little Black girls who come up to you and they say, that's me. That's like, I see me in what you just did. And is that your audience? And if and in this moment we're talking about Black Girl Freedom Week, who are you creating for? Is it for yourself first, and then these imaginary little Black girls? Was it for your Black girl self first? Who are you creating for?
Yes, actually. Yes to all of it. Because I also use my different avenues for art to create for different things. So a lot of times when I'm writing poetry, I do it for me. I do it because it's healing. I do it because it's freeing. It's a way for me to express myself in a way that I can't really do sometimes in my other art forms. But the reason why I perform it is for Black women. I perform it because I know that by sharing my story, I'm empowering someone else to share theirs. And so, yes, most of what I do is for Black people and Black women. Like, my mission is to create work that authentically represents the multi-textured lives of Black people in a way that makes them feel seen, heard, and celebrated. And so my audience is Black people. My audience is for my family, who I want them to sit around the table and discuss my work. And for families like mine, I want them to sit around their kitchen table after seeing my work and say, no, how did this make us feel? But also my work, because I am a Black woman, because of the experiences I've held, it's for Black women. I always want Black women to feel safe and heard when they're in spaces where I'm sharing my art. And then also a lot of the stories I tell as well center mental health. I'm a big mental health advocate, especially for my own mental health journey. So stories that also show mental health and Blackness and how those two things exist and highlight how these exist within our families, our family structures, within our history, within our daily lives. But yes, Black people, I make my work to be Blackity Black, Black, Black. For Black people to come, build community, be in community, and celebrate together and talk about it.
I would say for me, I'm currently in a place where I'm healing my inner child. So a lot of the work that I've been creating is for me, which, as I say this out loud, sounds a little selfish, but I'm learning the rhetoric that, like, to heal others, you first must heal yourself and take care of home. Um, and that is a philosophy like I personally live by, as the work that I create and the work that I know I will continue to create in the future is for my community. It's to create spaces and uplift them. And because I had an opportunity to live overseas when I was a lot younger, so while home will always be the Black community, I've like living in Southeast Asia and having close family friends who are of Latin descent. It really is. I want the entire population of people of color to feel like they have a space where they can go and just be, and whether they're being with people who look like them and share an ancestral cultural history, or whether they're expanding their horizons, they can simply exist. But I think right now I'm really focusing on letting me and the work that I create allow myself to simply exist.
I think I'll pass it over to Professor Salter for to close us out. But who are you creating for?
I'm simultaneously creating to honor all that it took to make a person like me come into the world. That, though, I don't know if you saw the previous panel, but that wonderful woman who talked about the legacy, the miraculous legacy of which we are all the embodiment of. And for my contribution to the future of that. I'm creating on the continuum. Yeah.
A beautiful echoing and signaling back to your famous work too as well. So thank you for the writer and you bringing it all together for us. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
I just want to say thank you all for this dynamic conversation, such a vulnerable and honest conversation. I don't oftentimes talk about Black theater and Black drama and dramaturgy and acting through the lens of Black girlhood. And so it's really been kind of nice to do a new conversation with you all. So thank you for that. And I'm just honored to participate in Black Girl Freedom Week. I can't believe this was once upon a dream that came about, I think, in the summer of 2020, to commit an organization, an institution to support the dreams and the hopes and the lives of Black girls and their families and communities. So honored to be part of Black Girl Freedom Week. Thank you for being here. And yeah, there's more exciting stuff to come.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.